We now come to Southwark Fire Station. Oh no. We move to the development management bit, which I'm going to read out the rules. Officers. This fine body of people over here will present the report, outline their recommendations and answer questions raised by the committee. I remind the committee that the members over here that you will have the opportunity to ask questions of the officers after we've had the chance to interrogate both the applicant and the objectors, the ward councillors or anyone that supports the scheme. If present and wishing to speak, the following may then address the committee for no more than 3 minutes each. One spokesperson representing any objectors to the application. By now you need to have identified a single spokesperson. If there's more than one objector, the time will be divided accordingly within a 3-minute slot. If you are an objector, please tell us, indicate what questions you would like us to ask you to be able to further explain your to further explain your objection, so that you don't feel limited to the 3 minutes of speaking for your introduction. We then take the applicant to their agent, then one spokesperson representing any supporter who live with, and they've got to live within 100 metres of the development site. A ward councillor representing the area affected by the proposal. Ward members in attendance and those nominated to speak on behalf of objectors, supporters, applicants should sit in the front. Don't worry about that later. Basically, this is for ease of communication, not to sort of open up any presentations, but for just to seek clarification should committee members through the chair want to just a yes or no answer to confirm their belief or not of what's been said. Each speaker should restrict their comments to the planning aspects of the proposal and should avoid repeating information which is already in the report. The meeting is not a hearing where all the participants present evidence to be examined by other participants. At the end of each representation, the committee may ask questions of the speaker, the presenter, Speakers should lead the committee to the subjects which we would like to, you would like us to ask you questions. After receiving all submissions, the committee will debate the application and consider the recommendation. This is a council committee meeting which is open to the public and there should be no interruptions from the audience. Finally, I would like everyone present to know that although the planning committee comprises members of different political parties, we're not politically whipped. Our decisions are made in accordance with the Council's planning policy and based on the information contained within the relevant reports, together with the consultation responses and any verbal submissions made today. How we approach this is further explained in the Development Management Report at item 7. We now then move to item 7.3, which is Southwark Fire Station. Who has the great pleasure of introducing this? Yvonne.
I do, Chair. Thank you very much. Excuse me. Oh, shopping centre. No, I think it was swiftly. I hadn't realised. I hadn't realised that was still on the beginning of the presentation. Sorry about that. I don't know how long it goes on for. Oh, quite a lot.
The first half of it, page 37 in our.
Oh right, not too far. I'm not too far off. A couple more. There we are. There we are. Hey. Okay, thank you. The report that you have covers 2 applications, one for planning permission and one for listed building consent, both relating to the development of the former Southwark Fire Station on Southwark Bridge Road for a school, 199 flats, a commercial unit and a small gym. The application for planning permission also covers land at Grotto Place, where a sports centre, games court and new open space will be created for use by the school and the local community. It's important to note the addendum report that you have with you this evening, which as well as noting recent comments, provides further advice and information on key issues which were not fully resolved at the time that the main report was published. And I explain the recent events and recommendations on these matters as I go through my presentation. In relation to the school, the report underlines the clear and urgent need for a new secondary school for North Southwark. The Council School Places planning strategy sets out the shortfall in secondary places from 2018 onwards, and the Department for Education has given approval for the school and confirmed funding support through the Education and Skills Funding Agency. The school would cater for 1,150 pupils, that is 6 classes in each year plus a sixth form, and would be built by Hadston, the developer, to a design which has been worked up in conjunction with Haberdashers' Asks, who would then run the school as a non-selective, mixed-sex community school under their federation. And the areas shown in blue on that plan are the areas which are the school part of the application. Policies at all levels, from national to local, strongly support the creation of new schools, and the emerging use of the plan has designated the fire station site requiring the development to provide a secondary school and new homes. And whilst the emerging plan can be given limited weight at this time due to its stage in the adoption process, the designation does give a clear indication of the Council's objectives for this site. As is seen by the large number of responses in support of the application, there are a lot of parents waiting anxiously for places for their primary age children, hoping to avoid a long school commute or the option of moving away. Schools are central to building strong communities, and good schools will encourage families to move to an area and to stay put as their children grow. The need for the school is well evidenced, and the benefits can be given significant weight when determining the application for planning permission. The school is a good reuse of the listed buildings involving sensitive alterations and extensions, and maintains the provenance of the grand Winchester House facade. The extent of demolition can be justified, and in some cases is beneficial, such as the removal of an unsympathetic modern addition to the facade of Winchester House. The new buildings are well designed and positioned, and are good quality, using brick and simple detailing. And this is an impression of the internal courtyard face with the new building, as you can see at the back. And these images show that's Pepper Street, just off Copperfield Street, where there's a sort of limited intervention for the new dining block and entrance block. And this is the facade from Southwark Fire Road, which is the new entrance wing. And this diagram shows the age of the various pieces of heritage asset on the site, which have been retained and reused as part of the build, either the school or in some cases the housing. In relation to the Grotto Place site, it's worth noting that in early discussions with Hadston, the proposal was limited to the fire station site only, and it was proving very difficult to accommodate all the school's accommodation needs, particularly the large format building needed for the sports hall and the space needed for the games court for PE, while still achieving a good quality school and the homes needed to support the mixed-use development. The Grotto site is owned by the council but held on a long lease by the fire authority, who had been using it for training and fitness. And bringing this site into the application significantly relieved the pressure on the main site, resolving a lot of the most intractable problems encountered in the early designs. Under the development plan, the council would normally strongly resist developments on borough open land, other than small-scale buildings to support the open space use. In this case, the report concludes that development here can be justified for 3 main reasons: the significant improvement to the overall quality of the school environment and the positive impact on healthy lifestyles and participation in sport, the improvement in the current appearance of the site, including much more planting and landscaping, and importantly, public access to a site which has for many years not been open to the general public, including access by the community to the sports hall and games court outside of school hours. And that's a section of the sports hall and an image of the sports hall facade. BOST, Bankside Open Spaces Trust, have expressed interest in designing, delivering and then managing the new open space on the Grotto site. They have worked with Haberdashers on a design, but this is not formally part of the application. The funds being offered by Hadston, which is increased to £375,000 from the £275,000 in your report, would be very unlikely to meet the costs of the BOST proposal. Therefore, The Section 106 agreement linked to this application should secure further design work and a mechanism for future management, and the developer should work with the council to explore options for funding of the space, which is an important component of the overall scheme. Now turning to the residential element of the scheme, this provides 199 flats in a new building ranging from 7 to 10 stories in height, as well as converted structures from the old fire station. Although not formally defined as a tall building under the Southwark plan, at 10 stories the new block would be the tallest structure in the immediate area, just slightly taller than the Moonraker Point student housing opposite on Sawyer Street. However, there are a number of taller buildings in the wider area, such as on Union Street and further north on Southwark Bridge Road and Blackfriars Road. The new building has been carefully tested in local views. In local views, and sorry, I've just lost my place, apologies, including from nearby conservation areas, and whilst it is a significant building, it is not overbearing and can sit comfortably in the street scene. The design, which uses brick in different planes and textures, and the distinctive rooftop dormers, is high quality and was supported by the GLA in their comments. There are a number of aspects where the housing quality does not meet the Southwark Plan policies or the guidance for excellent design in the Residential Design Standards SPD. Although each flat does meet the space standards required and the internal layouts are logical and efficient, the proportion of dual aspect flats is low, the amenity space is limited, and there are a high number of studio and one-bedroom flats and a shortfall in the number of larger family-size units. This has come about in part because of the deep perimeter block format and partly in order to improve viability. The smaller flats will generally command a higher price per square metre than larger ones, and dual aspect flats are more difficult to achieve in one-bedroom units. The flats are not so compromised as to be poor quality accommodation, but the extent to which they could be described as being excellent, which would normally be required to justify high density development, is questionable. As the report says, this is something which the committee should weigh up against other benefits of the scheme in making a decision. Officers recommend that this is something which can be justified, and the GLA took the same view in their Stage 1 report. Coming to the important issue of affordable housing, which is included in the addendum report, as the main report says, the negotiations on affordable housing have been going on for several months, very many months, and unfortunately could not be fully resolved before the main report was published. I will briefly set out some history and then the recent events and the officer's recommendation. The applicant is purchasing the site from the London Fire Emergency Planning Authority, who sit within the GLA. The originally agreed purchase price was £54 million. On the basis of this purchase price, the applicant submitted that they could not provide any affordable housing whilst remaining viable. GVA, who are experts working on behalf of the council, assessed the applicant's viability appraisal and agreed that if 54 million was accepted as benchmark land value, then it was the case that no affordable housing could be provided. However, the council's viability SPD and the mayor's recent guidance is clear that purchase price should not be accepted as a benchmark land value, especially since in this case the price did not take account of the policy requirements for affordable housing. The applicants put forward an alternative use value option which GVA for the council considers should be valued to around £40 million. And on that basis concluded that the development should be able to support around 22% affordable housing. There followed a detailed and protracted negotiation between the GLA and their planning advisors, the applicants and ourselves. At the time of the main report, the Mayor had accepted the principle of adjusting the purchase price in order to enable the scheme to deliver some affordable housing. But there were still some areas of dispute between the GLA's advisors and the applicant's advisors as to the detailed costs and value inputs in the appraisal and the mechanism for delivering affordable housing. Following those very lengthy negotiations, the Mayor has now set the purchase price at £42.255 million and is intending to issue a direction that LAFIPA accept this lower price. Both the Council and the GLA would normally expect affordable housing to be provided on site unless exceptional circumstances exist which justify an off-site or in lieu payment. Hadston, the developer, are not willing to offer affordable housing on site, but have offered an in lieu payment of £13,856,722. And the justification they have offered is as follows. The mix of units in the scheme coming forward is dominated by one-bedroom units, which would not meet the priority need of the council for affordable housing. A redesign of the scheme at this stage would cause further delay to the delivery of the school, and a larger number of family-sized units would impact on the valuation, because, as I said earlier, small units command a higher value per square foot or square metre, and require further analysis and negotiation, which would again cause delay. GVA, acting as advisors to the council, had suggested that a benchmark land value of £40 million would support an in lieu payment of around £14 million. I can go through these figures again if it gets hard to follow. If the new price of 42.255 million is acknowledged in a stand-back analysis, then the offered sum of 13.857 roughly million would represent a good offer as an in lieu sum, and it would be indexed from July 2020. Coming on to impact of on the neighbours, so I'll just go through some of these images and I can come back to them. Several objections have been received relating to the impact on neighbours' amenity, including daylight and sunlight, privacy, outlook and noise disturbance. There are a small number of windows which will experience daylight and sunlight losses beyond those recommended by the BRE, but the impact is relatively minor, particularly when compared to other developments we have seen in the central area. Amendments were made to the block adjacent to Copperfield Street to reduce its scale following pre-application consultation with the neighbours, and I've just made a note that the addendum corrects the statement in the main report that there are no windows in that elevation. There are some windows, they are high level and they are obscured. So in terms of the impact on privacy for Copperfield Street, their privacy would not be impacted. In terms of traffic and parking, there is no parking provided for the school and only 3 spaces for disabled users within the residential courtyard. No staff and no residents would be able to apply for on-street parking permits, except for blue badge holders. The site has a very high PTAR rating, accessed by public transport, and is in a controlled parking zone and within the congestion charging zone, and all of these factors would discourage car use, including drop-off for pupils. The site would be serviced on an access via Sawyer Street to avoid disrupting the cycle route on Southwark Bridge Road, and the residential courtyard can accommodate servicing vehicles. I've got to just go back just to show you the residential courtyard, which is in the centre of that picture. Discussions are still ongoing with the Highway Authority about the relocation and redesign of the pedestrian crossing and potential relocation of the bus stop on Southwark Bridge Road, and these matters will be secured in the Section 106 and delivered through an agreement with the Highway Authority. The report refers to the removal of a number of trees to accommodate the new school buildings and sports hall. None of these trees are specifically protected by tree preservation orders, and none are classified as high-value Grade A trees. The removal can be justified to accommodate the development, and replacement trees are shown with potential for additional trees on the new open space on the grotto, for which the design has not been finalised. I draw members' attention to the representation summarised in the addendum and to the draft decision notices, which are also attached to the addendum. No new issues were raised in the late responses which have affected the recommendation. So the delivery of school is in line with the National Planning Policy Framework and policies at regional and local level, and there is a very clear evidence of the need for it and the support for it. The extent to which some elements of the overall development do not fully comply with other policies is set out in the report, but none are so serious as to override the significant benefits that arise from the school. And so on that basis, officers recommend that planning permission be granted, subject to completion of the Section 106 agreement and referral at Stage 2 to the Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for the figures. Have anyone want any clarification on the figures? Yep.
Well, yes, on a few different points actually.
Brilliant. Shall we do those figures first? There's a range of questions.
On the affordable housing figures.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Kind of linked into that, but a few of them are.
Well, let's try and do it in some. Let's do the affordable housing figures so that Yvonne only has one thing to concentrate on and one page to look at. Hey, let's go.
Yvonne, just to be clear about paragraph 25 in the addendum report, which is referring to the benchmark figure of £100,000 per habitable room, and the amount of affordable housing that would support. That, just so that I'm correct in my reading of that paragraph, that is saying to us the number of habitable rooms that could be provided in affordable housing provision elsewhere with the sum of money that's offered as an in lieu payment. Not that that is the equation to reach the in lieu payment. Is that correct?
Our affordable housing SPD, which is not recent, so you need to bear in mind, gives 100,000 per habitable room defaulted as a sort of guide price for the higher value areas of the borough. But I simply wanted to be fair and make the point that depending on where affordable housing is delivered and the type of housing that it delivers, we may not always achieve a habitable room for £100,000. So whilst we tend to use it as a sort of guide price, it is something which we increasingly need to be sort of mindful may not properly reflect current build costs.
Am I right in thinking, though, that that's certainly historically been a figure that's been used to calculate what the in lieu payment should be, i.e. it's calculated on the basis of £100,000 for 35% of the habitable rooms delivered on a site without providing any affordable housing?
We would tend to approach it from both directions. You would need to maximise what a scheme could provide viably, but would also provide members with information as to how close it would be to meeting a policy requirement for a number of habitable rooms, and that's where the 100,000 figure tends to be used, to give an indication as to whether through that in lieu payment at £100,000 you would achieve a 35% scheme.
And then I think it's and so just to kind of draw that to its kind of natural conclusion for me then, which is that am I right in thinking that the way this has been approached, in considering the fact that you've just said that we have to be mindful that £100,000 now is doesn't always provide equate to a habitable room. This scheme, the in lieu payment proposed as part of this scheme, it feels fairly significantly below that, which would be sufficient to provide 35% affordable housing provision elsewhere. Is that correct?
This is significantly short of 35%. I think 20% equated to around 115 habitable rooms. If you were to take 100,000, that would make 11.5 million, if my maths is right. So using the same parameter for calculation, the 13.5 would be about 138 rooms, which is what I'm showing here. And I must admit, I haven't got a calculator, I could work out what that means.
394, that's 30, that would work out as 35% of 300. Sorry, that would work out to be 35% of 394 habitable rooms.
Yeah, but
and so obviously this
we
scheme
have
is
500
more than...
each, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
okay. Thank you.
You sort of said your line of questioning there, Hamish?
Yeah.
Adele, you had...
Oh, actually, sorry.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
This is on a full...
Would you want to go?
No, it was just...
Yeah, it is. A really tiny point, actually. In your presentation, you said that the amount of in lieu payment that was being offered was £13,856,722, but the addendum report says £222. £500, you know. You said 722. 13,856,722, but the addendum report says 222.
It's subject to that being compared. Was Yeah. Well, affordable housing particularly, and then we'll go down the list of other items.
So I just wanted to seek clarification from you on this, Yvonne. So the I've got the name of the people now. Well, GVA said that according to their viability calculations, that the scheme could provide 22% affordable housing. Was that based on 22% affordable housing on site? Did GVA think that that could be provided on site? Because clearly, if you have to provide your affordable housing on site versus giving a quantum of money in lieu, that's a significant difference in expense, if you see what I mean. Because you've got to take a hit on the ones that you can't sell, so there's like a double hit if you convert private sale to affordable housing. Whereas if you give the money, you don't have that hit. So surely, so which is it? So was GVA's 22% based on an on-site delivery or an off-site delivery?
GVA concluded that based on a benchmark land value of 40 million, they could do 22% on-site or 14 million as a payment.
So I've just heard you correctly that the GVA assumption is that they could do it on-site.
Well, on 40 million, which is slightly less than they're having to pay, because it's 42 point whatever. Yes. Hadston contests that, but that was GVA's conclusion.
So why then have officers skipped to accepting in a new payment, and not only not accepting it, not having it, the affordable housing on site, but not even doing the second bit that you're supposed to, sorry, I didn't mean to sound accusatory, that is supposed to happen in terms of the sequence, which is to find alternative sites in the local area?
I think there are two answers to that. In relation to your first point, I don't think we're here saying it can't be done on site. The issue is whether you get a better outcome by doing it off site, because the units as designed are heavily skewed towards one bedroom and smaller units, and they have limited opportunities for things like amenity space because they are skewed towards those smaller non-family units. There are also issues about how the units fit within cores, and that issue that we've talked about many times in planning committees about whether you need to share cores to access affordable housing, and potentially therefore the redesign that would need to happen to perhaps produce a housing mix which better conform to what the council would want to deliver to meet its priority housing needs. So we are simply reporting to the committee that we hear the urgency to deliver this school and the priority to allow this scheme to go forward in order to meet September deadlines for school delivery and school intakes. We could continue to talk to the applicant about a redesign. We brought it to you on the basis that we felt there was more urgency attached to keeping the school going. And the same question really applies to the option of an off-site scheme, because again, as you'll have heard in planning committee before, finding a site, getting a planning permission and delivering those units off-site is something which can only really be achieved if you're aiming at that outcome from the very beginning of an application process. Otherwise, if we were to ask Hadston to do that now, it would create another and probably quite lengthy delay in the school delivery process.
Yeah, no, I want to exhaust all these questions and then go on to design and seeing those issues, areas.
So this is a scheme that has been with the council for a considerable amount of time, and we are in an addendum report seeing for the first time the affordable housing contributions that are being offered and the discussions and everything. Why? I mean, this is a fundamental part of any planning application, and I just wondered if you could explain why it has been in the system so long and yet we are working on an addendum report here.
As I said at the outset, when this application arrived, on our desks, in fact, well, at the pre-application stage as well. The applicant maintained that based on the amount that they were being asked to or required to pay for the site by the GLA under the former mayor, they would not be able to provide affordable housing. When GVA on our behalf assessed it, they agreed with that, but challenged the assumption that that purchase price ought to be accepted as benchmark land value. And we reached something of an impasse because Hadston were saying, well, it's on public record and in a very sort of clear and transparent process how we have been required to pay that £54 million sum for the site. Whilst GVA were saying, well, that doesn't reflect the true value of the site if you were to take into account planning policy. So we spent very many months arguing that point, and it was, I suppose, only when, following interventions at a very high level from the council, that the new mayor, undertook to agree to review the purchase price, that it unlocked the ability to deliver affordable housing. And unfortunately, right up until last week, we were having those conversations because the GLA's own advisors came with various sums that they felt were appropriate as purchase prices, taking into account affordable housing. Hadston continued to challenge individual inputs into those assumptions, and it was just literally, in the last few days that we've managed to, the GLA, ourselves and Hadston, reach a position that we felt we all could accept and move forward to the committee. So it is unfortunate. It's, as you say, it's been with us for very, very many months. But this particular issue was one which was incapable of being unlocked until very recently. It's a very unusual situation.
I'm always reminded that, and I think we've discussed this, it has been brought to our attention at briefings that it straddled a mayoralty and two different mayors that had a very different approach, which, anyone working with the GLA would put them alongside Network Rail, quite frankly, for the speed at which they move. Are there any further questions on the affordable housing?
Mine's on on the housing.
We can move on to, is that design scan?
No.
Hamish, you lead and I'll write out the category.
Thank you, Chair. I just actually wanted to confirm, it's a relatively simple thing, but in the report there's the number of units being provided is sometimes cited as 199, sometimes as 205. I saw there is a clarification, I suppose, in one paragraph, but the report as a whole still mixes the two figures. I just wanted to be clear about how many units it was.
It's 199. It was reduced from 205, and unfortunately, I think the report itself is consistent. Where I think you've probably seen that 205 figure is on the header, which unfortunately seems to have slipped through the net as a revision, but it is very definitely 199.
And then one other. Oh no, sorry, no, that's fine. That makes sense.
Adele, did you have a question there? Did I see you?
No, it's fine.
Right. Okay. Any questions on the design?
Any questions on the design?
Adele.
Actually, I'm not sure if it specifically comes under design as such, but it's in terms of the layout, design in terms of layout rather than. Yeah. So in the plans, there's an area that between the backs of the houses in Copperfield Street and the school, that's just a kind of nothing's. It is on one of these. It's just sort of a strip of land where nothing seems to be happening, and I just wondered what is going in there, and has that been through the secure by design? Because obviously that runs around the back of the properties, and it's just not very clear what that's for. I mean, is it simply to separate the distance from? And actually, on that point, if I may, Chair, ask about the distances between the school and the backs of the Copperfield properties.
Yep.
I think. You might. Do you mean this little bit? Sorry, if I bring this up, can I? Do you mean that the white bit in effect on there?
Yeah, the bit between.
Yeah, between the red line and the grey box.
And the grey boxes, yeah.
Yeah. I think it is simply a separation device and be there for, it may be for firefighting, but also for maintenance of the skin of the buildings of the new school, which is the grey block in effect.
I've been through because obviously it runs down the back of the of all of the gardens of Copperfield Street. So in terms of secure by design, for example, or other considerations, has it been through that?
There has been a secure by design process. I can't remember this coming up, but it is within the secure curtilage of the school in effect, because you have to go, the Pepper Street entrance is secure, so you'd have had to go on through that secure line before you could access that strip, because it's not accessible from anywhere else.
Can I just remind members before we get into too much detail, we will be able to ask questions of the officers later, and the applicant might be in a better position to be able to answer some of these detailed questions as to what the particular bits of land are for. Are there any, on that basis?
Well, there was my other bit, which was there's nothing in the report that talks about normally, you know, when there are, particularly when there are buildings that come closer to residential than ordinarily one might expect. So again, it's not mentioned in the report, the distances.
It's not a consistent distance because of the uneven building lines. We normally put it in where we're talking about overlooking, because the distance is, obviously we've got a separate assessment of daylight, which is a sort of functioning part of distance, and then parts that talk about privacy, and the distances are normally referred to where we have direct overlooking between windows. In this case we haven't got direct overlooking between windows, so we could have put, there wouldn't have been a singular measurement, because if you look at that boundary, there is, oops, there we are. There wouldn't be a single measurement that was helpful. So I take your point, but because we weren't protecting privacy, it was less of an issue.
On that clarification about the distances, are we happy?
Oh, I turned it off. On that clarification, are we happy to see if there are any objectors here? Are there any objectors here? Would you like to come forward? No, if you sit on the front desk here. Yeah, so we see you. Are you together? Yeah, no. Have you worked out? You've written together, you've worked out, and you're speaking and you're here to answer questions. Then could you, once you have both given us your names, your 3 minutes will start. Go.
Address as well or just name?
No, just name.
Just name. Timothy Screech. Oh, sorry. Timothy Screech, S-C-R-E-E-C-H, as in the noise.
And Gordon Swap, S-W-A-P-P.
Oh yeah, good idea, yes. Yes.
Technical thing, okay.
1 second, please.
Good.
May I begin? I've been asked to speak for those who object to this application. I've gathered opinions from many neighbours, but most, like me, are residents of Copperfield Street, whose properties abut the fire station grounds which you've just heard about. Firstly, I would like to point out a parallel point, which is that the plans and documents relating to this application were unavailable on the council website throughout the entire weekend, as well as Thursday and Friday of last week and most of yesterday. In my view, this meeting should be adjourned because it is not acceptable for the documents to be unavailable in the 4 days leading up to such an important application as this. Firstly, however, the Old Fox and Hounds, which we just heard about, the pub on the corner, which is where I happen to live, will have a party wall with the new school as currently proposed. I'm not aware of the legal requirements, but I would like to point out that to me it beggars belief that the developers have never sought to contact me in the 2 years they've been working on this to tell me that I'm going to have a party wall. Whatever the law says, how dismissive and arrogant towards neighbours can you be? From this, of course, suspicion is bound to arise. Secondly, now having finally been able to see the plans as of yesterday afternoon, I put it to the committee that they are deficient.
There are no three-dimensional views as good practice requires. Crucially, all drawings relating to are lacking in relation to the corner of that old Fox and Hounds in the well which Councillor Morris just referred to, the back space. We simply can't see how the school will join onto the building, but from what I can tell, and of course this is subject because the drawings are inadequate, it would appear to me that the wall will now run 3 metres from my bed. I don't say from my wall, but actually from my bed. That wall will then continue along parallel with Copperfield Street, at the worst case only 2 metres from people's walls or 5.5 metres from their windows. On top of this, there will be extremely noisy machinery. I would like to point out to you that the noise machinery and plant is deliberately disguised on the drawings. You're probably not aware of them. You also, of course, are well aware that a gap of 21 metres is required. Here we have sometimes as little as 2. The maximum is 13 metres, so only about half of what the guidelines require. Between this school wall and our properties, there is this long 60-metre void. It is north-facing and will surely become rank and possibly infested. Moreover, we believe it flouts the formally agreed police security initiative. It severely compromises our security and also that of the school. We believe a redesign should take place with this black hole eliminated. The developers have sought to promote the project, in other words, as a win-win with no losses, everyone wants a school, but that is not the case. They also know that they have you to ransom, if I may say so, ladies and gentlemen, because you so desperately need a school. A school may be necessary, even desirable, but it must be proportioned to the site. Seeking to cram in 1,105 pupils, also 200 staff, is simply too much for the area. This project should be sent back and made proportionate to the space available.
Thank you very much indeed.
Members of the committee are now able to ask you questions. We have to play microphone ping pong, so when I turn on, you have to turn off, similarly with everybody else. Do any members of the committee? Hamish?
Forgive me for my ignorance, but I just want to be really clear about where you're talking about. The Fox and Hounds part, that building, is that the sort of north-eastern corner of the well,
you see it there.
Yeah, thank you. There's a pub at the south-east.
There is indeed, which is still operative. This is now
the one. Yeah, good. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Adele?
So can I just clarify, so although we heard from the officers about the closeness of the building being in relation to the windows, are you saying, or rather being in relation to overlooking, are you saying that actually there are windows from the Copperfield properties that are going to be looking onto a very close blank wall?
The windows, as far as we can tell, are frosted, so we won't have people actually looking in at us.
No, I meant the other way. So we'd heard that, but the other way round from the people who live in Copperfield Street, are they going to be looking out of their windows into a very
Yes,
close...
as far as we can tell, I'll look out of my bedroom window, and about 2 metres away from me will be a brick wall higher than my bedroom windows.
With some windows as well, actually.
Well, the frosted windows from school.
Frosted windows with a frosted window toilet, a 2 metre high window.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to ask about, you say that you haven't been consulted about a party wall. What has been the degree of consultation that you've had with the applicant?
Michael, I hate to remind you on this occasion, but party walls are not a planning issue.
No, sorry, I was thinking about the whiteness.
Yeah, no, you introduced it by...
Oh, I do. Sorry, your question again?
So how much?
The degree of consultation over the planning application that you've had with the applicant?
Very little, actually.
It's been, I think the boxes have been ticked, but almost every time there's been a meeting, and there have been several, inadequate designs have been produced to us, and key factors have been not produced, even disguised. So we've had a great sense of concern that Hadston, the developers know that the council desperately needs a school, and that's fine, we do need a school, but that they know that you're going to have to sacrifice things. They think that you're going to let them get away with things. And so many of the meetings have been about how much pupils' parents are brought in to say how wonderful, but the existing needs of the community have not been considered.
Just to add to that, if you look at this image up on the wall there are lots of images round the front, round the outside, but there are no 3D views round the back of Copperfield Street or Pepper Street. So there's never been a 3D view to show us how that looks at the back. That's what's missing.
Yes.
And if you say you... Yeah. And if you say you currently don't have a wall 2 or 3 metres from your house, are you expecting the degree of light that you'll get into your property to be significantly reduced?
There are 2 properties there. I happen to have the higher one, so I'll be slightly less affected. The flat downstairs will be much more significant. The people aren't able to come today, but they'll be much more significantly affected. They will have they will look out onto a wall only 2 metres away, which is significantly taller. In my case, I'll look out onto a window, into a wall which will come about halfway out my window. It might not actually affect direct sunlight. The sun is higher than that, but clearly it would affect ambient light.
Are there any further questions that members would like to ask the objectors? As there are no further questions, thank you very much indeed for coming along. Do appreciate it. Is the applicant or the applicant's agent here, please? Same rules apply. Introduce yourselves. Oh. And once you've introduced yourselves, your 3 minutes will start.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brian Fitzpatrick. I'm the Development Director for Hadston Southwark Limited.
You have to speak up a bit louder than that.
Sorry. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brian Fitzpatrick. I'm the Development Director for Hadston Southwark Limited.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sean Tickle from Wolfstead Planning.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Fred Sharrock from the Haberdashers' Asks Federation.
Good evening, I am Tian Wild. I am Vice Principal at Hatcham College, which is one of the Federation schools.
Thank you. We're going to kick off. Brilliant. Off you go.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. This is, as you know, really a once-in-a-generation opportunity to deliver a major new school for Southwark, really at the heart of Bow and Bankside. There are no other sites which have the capability, location or indeed the history of the old Southwark Fire Station. This is an iconic local landmark and the proposals will give a lasting legacy for an amazing new school at the heart of the local community. In addition to high quality design, there are some very significant planning benefits of the scheme which the planning officer has comprehensively outlined to you in the report, including the school, new secondary and sixth form for 1,150 pupils, a new sports centre which will be shared with local people and which will be affordable for use by local people, and new public open space. There is a restoration of sensitive heritage buildings with a rich history and a provision of new homes, including a contribution to affordable homes equivalent to 22%. As well as other range of environmental and highway improvements. We've held very detailed discussions with local people at a range of events and met groups such as Bankside Open Spaces and local parents and all the local people. The dialogue has resulted in reductions in scale of buildings, particularly on Copperfield Street, and enhanced public access and management of the grotto. The application, as you know, is supported by the Bankside Residents Forum and has a strong support from local residents. It is important that we secure a positive decision tonight to allow the school to be operational as soon as possible. So rather than address some of the planning issues, which I'm happy to field questions on, I'll pass now to Fred and Tian from Haberdashers.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we took on this project after we were approached by local parents worried about the shortage of secondary school places in this area in 2015. We're really excited about opening a school in Southwark and about putting these wonderful buildings back into community use. If this application is approved today, we think we can just about manage to have the school open in temporary accommodation in September 2019, when there otherwise won't be enough school places, but there really is no more time. The Haberdashers' Asks Federation is a group of schools in South London, not a chain with national ambitions. This school will benefit from the support of our other schools in the area, especially Hatcham College, which is where Tien works, and this project has been our sole focus since we embarked on it in 2015. That's because we want to establish schools that will serve their community for at least a century, or preferably longer, as Hatcham College has done. Yeah.
Just a few words about our schools. All of our schools are local community schools and are fully inclusive. We have high expectations of all our students on a social level and on an academic level, in terms of standards of behaviour and in terms of the curriculum that we offer. Outside of our normal academic curriculum, we offer a wide range of enrichment activities, and our focus, our ethos is about educating young people in the local community, developing their character and ensuring that we build the society that we want for the future through the education that we provide. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you very much indeed. You have to do the same ping pong with the thing. Hamish and Adele, you had questions around affordable housing. Do you want to do those first? Ask Deep.
I think the officer's answer is fine. I just wanted to give you numbers.
Adele, do you want to ask your question? Yep.
What about which element? About the calculation of the off-site versus the on-site bit, the viability bit?
Yes, you asked quite a complicated question, which I think I grappled, I kept in track with.
Yes, which was about the GVA appraisal said you could deliver 22%, but that was based on on-site, which obviously is very different from a payment off-site because the hit, as it were, to the developer is lower. So could you please clarify?
Just to clarify the point that the planning officer made, the GVA report, actually the valuation was 38 million, not 40 million. And that was a response that would allow, in GVA's view, a delivery of 22% on site. So it's £4 million lower than the benchmark land value which the GLA have established over the last week or so. We disagree in terms of both the GVA and the GL Hearn responses, as you'd expect, but we do feel that in truth, if we took a blended one across all of those, you would not be able to deliver anywhere near 20%, in fact much lower percentage on site in terms of affordable housing, and that would have a very significant impact in terms of the delivery of affordable homes, whereas by having the benchmark set by the GLA at 42.25, and they have to also get best value for the fire brigade as well. So it's very important that there's a balance struck between what is the benchmark land value for the fire brigade to sell the site and what is a viable position for both the council and ourselves. And I think the agreement was that actually the offer of 13.8 million was an offer that originally came from the GLA as part of this process. We believe that is a viable offer, that there is additionality in that offer as well, that the developer is having to pay additional money beyond what the difference between the original land value was and what the revised land value was, which is quite a significant sum of money. So we actually believe that there is a really good offer here for the council. It will deliver the equivalent in terms of habitable rooms with that additionality of not having affordable housing on site of 22%, which I think is a very good offer in terms of when you weigh it up with all the balance of all of the other benefits. Not just the school, we have a sports centre which is going to be delivered on the grotto. That will be principally used by the haberdashers ask during the day, but it will be available for the community, and through a management committee we'll be actually potentially we'll be looking to make it affordable for local people for access. There is the offer of the local open space which BOFs will manage in terms of from the grotto, plus a whole raft of other benefits as well, including some significant highway improvements, including new signalised crossing on Southwark Bridge Road. So there are some very significant planning benefits which come with this, and that viability position is such that we believe that the offer of an off-site contribution is the best option here, rather than a much reduced provision on site, which we still don't know what the viable position of that is. As the planning officer also highlighted, there are some concerns in the functionality of trying to introduce affordable housing, particularly mixed tenure affordable housing, into one particular core in the building, which is very difficult.
Yes, I do. So local ward councillors and council officers and a whole raft of people wrote to the mayor and asked the mayor to reduce the value that they were asking for the site. And I certainly from a ward councillor's point of view, and I think from other people's point of view, that was because we were committed to having some on-site affordable housing in this scheme. So it's a great disappointment that we haven't. So you say that there could have, maybe might have been an offer that was possible on-site. Could you just clarify what that option might be, or might have been?
That would have required a much lower sale purchase price for the GLA, from the GLA to Hadston would have to have bought the land at a much lower benchmark land value than is being presented at the moment, which is much lower than the 42 million to 42.255, which the GLA has set. We don't know exactly what that position is at this stage, but it would have been, in our view, significantly below 38 million, which is, so it's already £4 million lower than the GLA's figure, and that would have meant that that core, which was the identified core was Block C, which is just off Sawyer Street. That would have delivered 19% affordable housing, 19.5% affordable housing off that core, but that is based on a benchmark land value, in our view, that is significantly below 42.25. And in other words, if we were to deliver that, we would end up with a mixed tenure core of social, intermediate and private in that core, which most registered providers would not look at favourably. So we just do not believe functionally, for lots of different reasons, that we can provide it on site. And we think that the best offer that can be delivered, hopefully in a local position, we'd like to work with the council to identify whether the site could be, but that offer of 13.86 million can be used to actually deliver genuine affordable homes in a local area.
Mine's quite a different subject, so you might want to see
So I just wanted to clarify in terms of the overall costs of the scheme. Have you, other than contributing the land, which obviously has a value attached to it, have you had to subsidise financially the school, or has all of the money for the school come from the EFA?
There is some grant funding, as you were, from the EFSA, but that does not cover the cost of the school. There is additionality that has to be covered by the developer.
Are you able to disclose the quantum of that, or is that commercially sensitive?
The shortfall on land payment from the EFSA is approximately £12 million when you calculate the area that the school takes. And from memory, the school takes 66.4% of the land on the main site, and the vast majority of the site on the grotto site on the side that is being allocated to the sports hall and Muga. In addition to that, there is a shortfall on the construction costs of approximately £6 million. So I think within the BPG viability analysis that was offered to officers way back in March, and which was tested by GVA, suggested that, in our opinion, there is a £18 million shortfall in terms of the grant funding.
Thanks, Chair. I've got some questions for Fred and Tian about the school.
Their planning questions. In a planning context,
in terms of the merit that the school will bring, I'd like to understand school's admissions process, how you'll spend things like people premium to help disadvantaged local children, and governance arrangements to make sure that the school actually is run to some extent by people with a local interest for children with a local interest.
Certainly. I mean, I'll tackle admissions and governance, and then perhaps Tian can talk about pupil premium. We will obviously have to consult on our admissions policy, so what I say now is subject to that consultation, but our intention is to keep it simple, to do a policy based around distance from the site the applicants live. So obviously first will come children in care, children with status of special needs, children with other particular medical and social needs, in due course siblings, and then distance. On your question about governance, we're a multi-academy trust, so each of our schools has a local governing body, and there is an overall trust board that oversees the entire organisation. On all of our school local and governing bodies there is staff representation and there is parent representation, and there are also co-opted members, and we co-opt on people for their skills. If we can get people with the skills that match the gaps in in the people who've been elected, who are also local, then that's a benefit, and we'd like to do that too. You want to talk about pupil premium?
So currently at the school that I work at, we use our pupil premium funding in a number of different ways. We use part of our pupil premium funding to employ extra teachers in order to reduce class sizes and to put extra support into specific classes. We also use pupil premium funding to identify particular catch-up programmes for students, or particular programmes for students who need that extra support. We have also used funding in terms of enabling students to access wider curriculum. So to enable them to go on trips, we subsidise all of the trips that students who are pupil premium students can go on, so that all of our students can access every part of our curriculum.
Thank you. Sarah.
Thank you. I just wanted to return to the point about the community use that's proposed for the sports provision. Could you clarify, a point was made in your presentation about the potential for it to be affordable, and I think you also mentioned potential governance structure. Could you just kind of review what you said again, and if possible explain it in a little bit more detail, given that community benefit it would be helpful to understand that more fully around what the local community benefits from in terms of those facilities.
Sorry, Nick. I'll try my best. Obviously the sports centre, there was going to be at the moment LaFIPA have a long lease on the land. They will lease it back to the council, who is also actually the freeholder as well. So this gets quite complicated. The council will then lease the sports centre and the Muga to Haberdashers, and they are looking at a lease of the open space to Bost at this stage. The management structure of the overall space will constitute 2 members of Bankside Open Spaces, 2 members of Haberdashers Ask, and 2 people from Hadston. So there'll be a management structure that will manage all of the overall grotto area. That management structure will assess the opportunity to bring in an operator for the sports centre, who will operate the sports centre outside of the times that Haberdashers are using it. So the school will use it from 8 till 5 out on school term times. Outside of those times it becomes available for the community. There will be set by the management structure in consultation with the sports centre operator, who will follow once we get hopefully permission tonight, touch wood, fingers crossed. That will then lead to a set of ideas in terms of the affordability of use of the sports centre for local people. So I don't have a figure at this stage because we haven't got through that process yet, but we are we've set a structure to be able to assess that the affordability and the management of the overall space, and that will involve longer term the Bost and Haberdashers Hadston will step away once the development is constructed.
Okay. Any supplementary on that one?
Sorry. No, it's not. So if it is, then...
Sorry, thank you. So, my nervousness about all this is that obviously this is a piece of borough open land, which ordinarily wouldn't allow to have a building of that size on it. There are all sorts of exceptions being made. I know that there are lots of ridiculously complicated lease arrangements going on, but my nervousness is that we haven't got anything written down yet about the affordability, and we've had, for whatever reason, we've had an addendum report tonight with a very, very important detail about the affordable housing. What I don't want is for us to agree tonight to something that may or may not happen down the line. So what assurances can we be given, and what will you accept from us in terms of kind of conditioning around this to make sure, because the key to this has to be, if we're going to have a building on there, then the community has to be able to use it, and it has to be at a price that they can afford. And that, to be fair, has been the view from just about everybody on the community side from day one.
Well, I'll pass on to Brian in a moment. I think there's going to be a mechanism within Section 106 which very much controls how the space will be managed. There'll be a lot more detail within that Section 106 if members want to assess that at some point.
I think the key bit is what reassurance can you give us that our thoughts about affordability concur with your thoughts about affordability and what the people sitting behind you think about affordability? How do we know? What reassurance can you give us? And perhaps the officers may be able to help with some how we benchmark this against other places or whatever, just to say they've got to agree that everybody agrees that this is affordable. Some people who are exceedingly rich would find anything affordable. Sean?
I think you're wrong there, sir. I'll pass to Brian because I think I was a hospital pad. But I would just say that it is this is one of the most complicated schemes I've ever been involved with, and I've done an awful lot in Southwark. And we want to make it right. We want to get every element of this right, and therefore getting the affordability side for the grotto is a key element to that. So we do genuinely believe that we want to make this work. And we want it to be affordable for local people. But I will pass to Brian, who, as a developer, will give you a lot more assurance.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think part of the problem is that we've been talking to a number of sports operators who are very interested in the venue, but they are not prepared at this juncture without a resolution to commit time and resources to work through a financial proposal. The scheme as designed is well suited to fit the purpose of both the school and the community. It's got a large forecourt sports hall, 150 square metre dance studio. And I think the most important thing that I can give you in terms of surety is that we, Hadston, don't end up with a lease for this borough open land. The lease is automatically given back rightfully to haberdashers and to Bankside Open Spaces, and they will control the lease. Our input will be purely that in terms of managerial responsibilities, and we will help to put our expert advice in there as deemed necessary. So it won't be us, Hadston, who will be setting the tariff of affordability. It will be set by representatives from haberdashers and Boss, and we'll also be inviting members of the community. And I think this is a really important point that we are inviting, and I won't take the credit for this, this is Tim Woods' suggestion, that we should be inviting members of the community to come in and play an active role in the grotto, because it is a community asset.
Can I make a suggestion? The officers might want to work up. Would you be happy that if we sort of benchmark affordability against the basket of our own and other similar affordable provision as a starting point for any discussion?
Nick, the honest answer to that is, providing that affordable tariffs that you set are not subsidised tariffs, then the answer is yes.
I think I was quite clear, and I didn't ask for a tariff. I said, would you be content to use that as a starting point for discussion rather than concluding that discussion?
I think the answer is yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
We'll ask if those people are content with that, and anyone who wants to go for that. Oh gosh, Hamish, you've got something different.
Yes, different.
Oh.
Back to the school, actually. I think you said in your presentation that the aim was for the school to be able to open, I think next September, you said, or September after, in temporary accommodation. Given that part of the reason and the rationale for there being no real time for further consideration of affordable housing provision was due to the need to get the school on site and operational, I just want to understand what the extent of that temporary accommodation is, how long it's likely to last, and why it is that there's an urgency from your point of view to grant permission ASAP if it's temporary accommodation as opposed to the completion of the permanent school accommodation.
Excuse me. So we think if the scheme goes forward today, that we would be able to open in temporary accommodation in September 2019. We think that, and this is driven by the build programme, so if you want to interrogate Hadston about that, but we think that we would be in a position probably to move into finished permanent accommodation a little over a year after that. So the school would be in temporary accommodation until, say, Christmas 2020. So the first cohort of 180 would spend a year in temporary accommodation. The next cohort of 180 would probably spend a term in temporary accommodation as well. And then we'd be able to move into building, assuming that construction had gone to plan. There's another factor here that around September 19. So, I mean, the construction is obviously what Hanson have to do. What we have to do is recruit staff, market a school, consult on admissions policy, do a statutory consultation on whether to enter a funding agreement with the Secretary of State, and a range of other things. And in order to market the school at the same time as all the other secondary schools, we need to get on with that pretty soon now. So if we don't get a decision today, then we'll be getting to the point where there simply isn't enough time to do those processes and open in September 19 and be confident that the school would be successfully marketed, full and successful.
Thank you, Chair. I think the objectors have put to you that you are trying to get a quart into a pint pot. You're trying to put too many pupils on the site, and they're suffering in Copperfield Street because the building is too big. And you've just said that you're going to be doing sixth form entry. Now, of course, we won't see that for the first 5 or 6 years. It won't be until the 7th year that the school will actually be full. So what assurance can you give us that you will still be able to deliver high quality education when the place is actually full to capacity?
We've got experience of delivering education in a range of different school buildings. We're very fortunate that some of our schools are in new purpose-built buildings further out in southeast London that are larger than this. Hatton College, I don't know if you know, it is largely in Victorian buildings that are very grand and not very well suited to modern education, and we managed to deliver an outstanding education there and a very popular school. So I'm not saying that it won't be without challenges, but we think we can do it, and we think that actually having these buildings as part of the school, the listed buildings, is a wonderful feature, and it fits with our ethos, which is about mixing the traditional with modern innovation.
Well, so mine is to the school, and it kind of relates to that. So I wondered if you could explain why, given that you have got a slightly constrained site, why it has to be 5 form entry. Why? Because you know, again, people have said about the numbers. So why 5 form? Why couldn't it be a 4 form entry, for example? No, it's not 6 form. No, it's 5 form with a 6 form. Well, no, it's 6 form. It's 6 form entry. It's 6 form entry. 6. Yes, sorry. Yes. Apologies. You're quite right. It is a 6 form entry. So my question is, why is it so big? You know, is it to do with the finances? Is it to do with kind of, I don't know. If you could explain why it has to be that many and why it couldn't have been a fewer forms entry.
Certainly, there's 2 reasons really. So the first is when you look at Southwark's analysis of the level of demand for places, that's the size of school that's needed to meet that demand, and I suppose there might be an option in which the council has a smaller school here and another one somewhere else, run by somebody else. The plan that we've been talking to the education part of the council about is that this school will meet the needs in this part of the borough. The other reason is, so I'm going to talk about 6 classes of entry, Year 7 and the 6th form, to try and stop us getting tied in knots. It is about making the 6th form viable. So we want to offer a good choice of subjects to students post-16. We want as many as possible of the students who are in the school to be able to continue into the 6th form, if they so choose. In order to have a viable 6th form, you need a secondary school feeding it of a certain size so that you can offer the range of subjects and make that appealing to students and financially viable. And dropping below 6 classes of entry starts to make that more challenging. So none of our other schools are smaller than that. Some of them, again, further out in London with bigger buildings, are bigger than that.
I think, cause obviously, there's been a lot of concern from local residents about the volume of young people who are going to be there. Could you just say, was there any possibility or at any point did you explore the option of a 6th form on another site which nearby, which is not uncommon?
We haven't explored any other site specifically. I think we had a hypothetical conversation about that once, but we haven't been made aware of any options for doing that.
Is it just want to make one quick point actually, or 2 quick points really. Firstly, the school is compliant with BB 103, even though it's a listed building, so actually having to meet those quite stringent standards is good. In terms of the points actually made in the committee report, the council will have a significant shortfall of secondary places by 2022. That's taking into account this school. So this school is a requirement to meet your current demand. It's not even a future demand.
Are we happy to move on? Oh yeah, the little bit of land around the side.
A little bit of land that runs round the back.
What's it for?
Residents raise concerns about their security and.
Just to be clear, I mean we've reduced the scale of that northern block significantly, at least a story, perhaps more than a story, and we've set back much of the accommodation. And as you've heard, we have obscure glazing, and indeed for most of that wall, the wall at the top end near the old Fox and Hounds, the new building sits at probably just under a metre higher than the existing wall. There's a very tall wall which surrounds the fire station, so we don't believe we are affecting significantly the properties on Copperfield Street, and we've had a very significant change to the scheme to do that, and then the daylight sunlight reports actually justify that. The space is, because the boundary is actually quite uneven, it moves all over the place really, so it's very difficult to get a building which runs all the way up to the boundary of the wall. In addition, we've also got to provide a fire access, it's means of escape from the building. So means of escape. Now, it's, as Yvonne pointed out, the space is secure. It's a secure space for the school. It won't be forgotten. It will have CCTV in there. It will be used by the school. Yeah, yeah.
On that, are we happy to go forward? If there are no further questions, thank you all very much. And now, is there a spokesperson who lives within 100 metres who would like to come forward? And you live within 100 metres? No, hold on a second. You sit down. You understand the drill? Yeah, no, you do now. You tell us your names. You also have to tell us where you live so we can confirm you live within 100 metres.
Sure. Is this within the 3 minutes? Okay. My name's Paola Wilson and I live at 19 Patterson House, and your clerk's already confirmed that I live within the 100 metres.
Oh.
I'd also like to mention that this is...
I'm Paula Beetlestone. I live 91 Mint Street.
Okay.
Amir Eden, Chair of Bankside resident from Park Street. I'm not speaking, but I support the application. So, they're speaking.
You don't live within 100 metres, don't you?
Just before I start... Just before I start, I just wanted to say that I have endeavoured, with your case officer and clerk, to submit to this committee some enclosures, simply because I just wanted to refer to them, or allow you to refer to them in your own time. I've got about 9 of them here, so I don't know if anyone wants to see them. But basically they back up some of the things I'm going to say.
If you close your microphone down,
oh, yes,
please, we have to play the ping pong. We can only distribute new information if the officers have had a chance to see it and to reassure us that it is not new information and it is already in the public domain. However, I'm not entirely sure that it is absolutely... If you make your presentation and see the way in which the questions might go, while the officers, one of them, if you could go and get one of those to see if it is possible to distribute it. Sadly, we can only put into the public domain stuff that is being checked.
Could I suggest that if you are both going to speak, you sit either side of the microphone? I did this before. I did that before. You sit either side of the microphone.
Okay, I'm going to let you speak. Yep.
Okay, anyway, but I'm not with them.
It's a sense of balance.
You might get asked.
Right. Turn on the mic. And your 3 minutes start. Brilliant.
My family lives on the edge of Mint Street Park, so although we're not immediate neighbours, we have a very strong interest in the community, and we know a lot of the local parents, and I've had very good links with the campaign group, practically leading it really. And as we all know, that by 2020 the population bulge here will be so great that Southwark's going to need the equivalent of a whole 2 new secondary schools. And in our view, the site is an ideal venue for the school, and we all want this to be a useful building as opposed to the commercial development which it would no doubt become and was about to become if it hadn't been for the Haberdashers initiative. All pupils will live within walking distance, and we consider our children are well behaved, so we're talking about a nice community which we wish to maintain. We have 5 good or outstanding primaries within a 10-minute walk of this site, yet secondary school provision is really poor here. Unless you're a girl, or you can get into a Christian faith school and you're a girl, Many parents move out before year 6 for this reason, or go private if they have the resources. And other 11-year-olds may be lucky enough to get a scholarship to a better school, but this will usually entail a 2-hour daily commute. And just as an example, from my school, there's just one who got a scholarship to Kingsdale, I think, on sport. Schools which were available last year, like Oasis and Bacon College, are now out of our catchment. And I would like to say that parents are desperate, and many waited for this school last year, and some actually left the area a little bit sad about this, to say the very least. And we're worried about Haberdashers' Federation and, you know, the ongoing situation. Last year, Charles Dickens had to send its 39 school leavers to 20 different schools, about a third of which were outside Southwark. The largest cohort was only 5 children, and splitting peer groups up like this has proven negative effects on the psychological health and well-being of kids. Long travel times impact on their health, safety and time for play, revision, family life and extracurricular development, particularly for those children with special needs. Studies commissioned by Southwark confirm that the high academic performance of the children from our primaries isn't sustained following secondary school transfer, and some of the best performing primaries have pupils who fare the worst at secondary. GCSE and A-level results are not good compared to the rest of the UK. But where pupils move in a cohort, so where the primary school is very local to the secondary school, there's a dramatic improvement in the exam results. And this is borne out by the MIME consulting document which Southwark itself commissioned. It's about 14% difference. So in my view, feeder schools and local secondaries have to be prioritised if Southwark's not to be letting down its pupils, particularly its boys and many Muslim pupils in this area. Now, the local schools, Cathedral's outstanding. Charles Dickens confirmed this year it's the 17th best in the UK. It's the 17th best in the UK for maths, and it seems shocking that children who manage this despite so many obstacles, half are on free school meals, over a third have special needs, many have English as a second language, are so poorly served. This school will build on the results of these great schools, and if it doesn't get built, it'll be a tragic mistake. We won't get another developer prepared to do this. There's no other suitable space. It's the perfect location for a much-needed secondary school, an absolute gift that mustn't be thrown away, and there is no plan B.
Are there any questions? Adele?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that presentation. I just wanted to ask you in terms of the numbers of pupils. So Charles Dickens is 2 form entry, Cathedral, St Joseph's are 1 form each, Friars is 1, Charlotte Sharman is 1. Are we making an assumption that the entire component, all of those schools will go to haberdashers? Because if we're talking, my concern is that you've said quite clearly about there being children from the local area. There's been lots of discussion about transport. You know, no, people won't be using transport because they'll be walking. So currently, to some of those schools, children are driven anyway to school from somewhere. And B, I'm just concerned about how far young people will be travelling to get to the school eventually. It's not a criticism. It's just to try and get a sense. To get it into perspective.
Sure. I think one of the other schools which hasn't been mentioned because it's a private school is London Christian School, but it shouldn't be assumed that children from London Christian School wouldn't be going to haberdashers, because there's actually quite a good fit between the two. Most parents that I know from London Christian School are actually not the sort who would be kind of sending their children to Eton. They're merely looking for really good quality education and didn't get their children into Cathedral or Charles Dickens. But also there are parents who live within the catchment of other schools, such as St George's, who would fall potentially within the catchment of haberdashers as well and be quite near. So we're not just talking about those schools that you've mentioned. And I would imagine, not having done a poll to find out from all parents what school they would like to go to, that there's going to be an element of wait and see, obviously, among parents to see what happens with haberdashers. But generally, the view that I've got has been very positive from parents about the possibility of this good school opening.
Yeah, just a supplemental. So on the traffic and transport issues, clearly there are some children who do travel a further distance. Either that, or they are incredibly unwilling to walk, shall we say, because all of the schools have car drop-offs in the morning. So I just wondered, and it's only because this is something that has been raised as a concern by local people. They're having new pedestrian crossings, talking about moving the bus stop. So clearly there is an acknowledgement that young people will be coming from further afield. So I'm just trying to balance.
I was going to say, Adele, I'm sure that's true, but I think by secondary school a lot of that will have fallen off, because these are no longer children who have to be ferried around because they're barely able to walk. They'll be able to walk, they'll be able to scoot, or whatever they do to get to school. So is there anything else you want to say?
I just wanted to say that I instantly think of one family that has had to move to get their older child into secondary school, and us having to then drive the younger children back to Charles Dickens, and this is not, I'm sure it's not unique, so it will stop parents having to move to go to secondary.
Sarah?
I just wanted to return to the point about your provision of affordable public access to the school buildings outside of school time. Have you been involved in those discussions with the applicant and with the school in terms of their development?
No, I haven't.
Will you?
I wouldn't mind if they asked me.
Brilliant. Come on, make sure that happens.
Are there any further questions? Michael?
Green open space to play sport. What provision is there for this, do you think? Have you talked to the school about it?
We consider that what's happening with the grotto site is very positive. There's a lot more space for sports activities for the children than there is in many, many other schools. And in terms of other facilities in the locality, you've also got Mint Street Playground just across the road, which has a sort of netball type court there as well, and football, and also Marlborough Street, you've got facilities that's very close by. So I can't foresee that there would be difficulties in getting that provision in for the children.
Are there any further questions? If there are no further questions, thank you both very much. And nice try, sir.
Is there a ward? David, you're the ward councillor. If you could introduce yourself, please. Your 3 minutes starts.
Thank you, Chair and Councillors. Councillor David Neggs, one of the Cathedral's ward councillors. I'd like to make it clear that I'm not speaking in opposition of this application. Ward councillors have supported both the principle and the campaign for the provision of a secondary school on this site once the decision to close the fire station was confirmed. I'd also like to acknowledge the work and the commitment of Hadston and Haberdasher Asks to delivering a school on this site. And I'd also like to acknowledge the need for a new secondary school. It isn't, however, a perfect application. I believe it's been compromised by the economics of having to provide housing. In regards to the size of the school, I would sort of echo the points that I think have been picked up, that I think there's a general feeling that 1,150 pupils is too much for that site. It's a shame, perhaps, that 900 pupils weren't on that site, with maybe the sixth form being on a different site. In regards to the management of the school, once it's opened, I would ask members to consider a condition or an informative requesting that Haberdasher Ask hold resident school and ward councillor meetings at least every 6 months in the first 2 to 3 years of the school opening. In regards to the Grotto Place site, we obviously welcome the community use, but this is a very residential area. There are the Wireworks Victoria Buildings, 91 Great Suffolk Street, Sawyer Street, 118 Southwark Road and Moonraker Point all surround the site, and I would ask that members consider an end time a little bit later, perhaps a little bit earlier, between about 9 p.m. and 9:30 rather than 10 p.m. And I would also request that it starts perhaps at 10 a.m. on Sundays, only on Sundays, so slightly later start so that everybody can have a lie-in and not be woken up. In regards to servicing delivery times, there isn't any detail in regards to that. I would expect there to be the normal servicing delivery times condition on that and servicing management contract, but I would ask members to pick up on that. I regress in regards to the housing. Affordable housing is not being provided on site, and obviously that's only meant to happen in very exceptional circumstances, and it should of course deliver 35%, and it's only going to deliver 22%. I think we know the reasons why that's happening, but obviously we do regret that it's not getting closer to policy compliance. In regards to the northern part of the site, I would ask that members do pay attention and sufficiently condition the application in regards to protecting the residential amenity of residents in Great Guildford Street and Copperfield Street, including considering the construction methods that will be used and whether a specific condition could be added requiring structural surveys to be carried out on those properties prior to work commencing, and the construction methods should be sensitive. I would also ask members to pick up on the new controlled pedestrian crossing that's discussed, that's going to be on Southwark Road near the junction of Marshalsea Road. It's not clear where that's going to be, and it could potentially impact on the properties at 133 to, I think it is 137 Southwark Road. Obviously happy to answer any further questions in regards to the conditions.
Thank you. Has anyone got any questions of David?
Thanks, Chair. On this subject of could it be smaller and have the sixth form somewhere else, you know the area. I mean, can you list other sites in the area that could be sixth form centres?
Well, we're not short of development sites in Cathedrals Ward, so I think there's potential for a building anywhere. I keep thinking that there is nowhere else to develop in Cathedrals Ward, but developers keep proving me wrong. So I don't have a specific site in mind, but there are huge development opportunities in Cathedrals Ward, and you know, we accept that we are where we are on this. But I think that there's a general feeling that perhaps 900 would have been a more comfortable number on the site, considering its size. But we recognise that's not what's before you today.
Thank you. Are there any further questions?
You were talking very quickly, which I understand why. Could you just clarify the question you made in terms of conditions about opening hours, I think, which were for community use? So
on the Grotto Place site, where the sports hall is going to be provided and the multi-use games area, that site is surrounded by residential properties, and the proposals at the moment, I think, are from 8 in the morning till 10 at night. And I feel, and I think in talking to some of the residents, we had a residents meeting, I think there are some concerns from residents who live around that site that, you know, and obviously a number of them will have children as well who need to go to bed and go to sleep, that 10 p.m. rather is too late, and that perhaps obviously we want to get the maximum use for the community of those facilities, but we think that a more reasonable time would probably be 9, maximum perhaps 9:30, because, as I say, people need to get sleep. And then I think on the Sunday, it's the normal time of an 8 o'clock start, and again we would think that people should be allowed to sleep in a bit on Sundays. And so I was suggesting a later time on Sundays only of 10 o'clock in the morning.
You were only asked about that?
Yeah. Okay.
Otherwise I've got nothing to ask you. The informative about regular meetings with all councillors on 6 monthly meetings, no problem with that. Sunday start, I've got some sympathy with, well, not sympathy with. The 8 till 10, is there a way we can finesse that through your regular meetings? So if there are any issues that arise, we start off at 9:30 and then go to 10 if there are no issues, subject to discussion. Just a nod.
Essentially, I mean, I would rather that we started with a more restricted. Yeah. Okay. Well, 9 or 9:30.
You gave me a choice, I chose. Maybe.
My preference would be for 9 rather than 9:30.
They do, Chair. Could I just could it be in line with Mint Street's Muga operation, which I believe is 9?
Servicing, yes, and then there was the construction stuff. Hopefully we'll ask officers about how they're going to deal with that. If there are no further questions, that's okay. 9 o'clock it looks like.
Okay. What are we up to? Any further questions to officers?
There were a number that came up around we'll deal with stuff that David mentioned, the possibility of asking for regular meetings with ward councillors on a 6-monthly basis, revising the start and finish times to, 8 till 9 and weekdays and Saturdays, and 8 till 10 on, 10 till, what time does it shut?
It shuts at 10, the suggestion was 9 instead.
So on the Sunday it starts 10 o'clock. That's okay. Any comment about servicing and how that's being dealt with, and also the construction? Can we start with those, please?
Shall I just pick up the hours? Can I just clarify, do members mean for the sports hall or for the park in its entirety, or the open space in its entirety? I mean, the reason I ask is that when we put 10, we had in mind seeing this as part of the council's normal park closing hours, which in summer, basically it's dusk, so the latest would be summer for a park would be 9:30 or 10. In winter, obviously, it's much earlier because it starts much earlier. And I think that was the kind of thought process in terms of how we'd come up with those hours.
So the difficulty is that the Parks Department don't close all of the parks. And in actual fact, thank you for raising that, Yvonne, because I think this is a situation where closing the park at a certain time would be appropriate because of its proximity to residential properties. I don't know if anybody from Bust is here who will be managing or potentially sorry, yes, who, were we minded to agree it, and were were all the various section 106 played out or whatever. So yes, so I suppose that the ideal would be that whoever is managing a park that may or may not be agreed locks it would be the ideal. But I don't know what we can do about that. I don't know if there anyone who might be locking it.
Well, we can, I mean, basically in the Grosso arrangement it says out of community access during school the term time. We just adjust it to read 8 till 9 weekdays and 10 till 9 on Sundays. It's very simple. That's what people were asking. That's what David asked.
But this is specifically about the lockability of the open space, and indeed the Mooga, because the Mint Street Mooga does get locked, I believe. The park doesn't, but the Mooga does. So
it'll be one of the few conditions we've got on, which is obvious and easy to enforce. It's either locked or not locked. So I'm suggesting the times that are being suggested by David. So it's 8 till 9 and 10 till 9. And if they call them problems, we'll come back and have them resolved later.
Has anyone got any further questions? Sarah, then Lucas.
Conscious I started this. If we restrict the hours of operation for community use, is there any potential impact we'll have on the affordable provision of that use to the community?
Again, as officers we took the view that things should be open for as long as was reasonably possible, bearing in mind the neighbours' amenity. So things like people wanting to play sport at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning wouldn't be that unusual. I mean, sometimes the gym I go to, children's football starts early in the morning because kids get up really, really early. And whether that's particularly intrusive to the neighbours if people are just arriving and leaving. And similarly with, most local open spaces are the ones that the council run, they're open early in the morning, people dog walking and going through them on the way to school, for instance, which wouldn't be possible under suggested hours. But anyway, so there is obviously an advantage to using it for as longer hours as possible to maximise the usage, which brings in money, and then, but bearing in mind amiety.
Just remember, we've got a further meeting. So, good questions. Or Sarah?
Is there any chance, is there a mechanism by which we could condition that it could be reviewed, in the sense of to go with the earlier times, taking into account residents' amenity? Sorry, Chair. And that if it is working, it could possibly go longer with the community ward councillor's support.
What I suggested is that we start off on the restricted level, and it becomes part of the discussion that the 6 monthly meetings, which is already put informative in, would allow that to go for a variation. I think there is also another bit in terms of the affordability. Any variation of the hours will have an impact, but we have no idea what that impact might be. What we do have is a mechanism for achieving a discussion around affordability, which is benchmarked against other provision which is in the area and around. If problems arise as a consequence of those discussions, we will have to review the opening hours earlier. However, I suspect that an hour difference in terms of shutting and an hour later on a Sunday will be marginal impacts, on the basis that the core hours are probably ones that people would wish to play rather than change. I think there's also an issue which we've done on another site where it is the use and the nuisance generating activity rather than the people leaving. So you can have a hybrid where people stop playing football at 9 o'clock, but actually leave between 9 and 10 o'clock. And I am also very much aware, as everyone is tapping their watches, that I am speaking too long. But I'm sure there is a solution that will come about as the discussions that David asked for, and the discussions around affordability, which would tease out those issues, and a variation can always be asked for if we agree the limited one. Are there any further questions?
And Lucas, but not simultaneously. Oh no, Lucas, you were first, sorry.
Okay, I will keep it short, and a one-word answer is sufficient. I suspect I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Given that where secondary schools are open in the borough, we see a huge amount of fast food outlets spring up, and we see many of our children queuing up to eat fast food out as soon as school finishes. Is there any kind of condition that we can place around the area to limit the number of fast food outlets that spring up in the following the opening of this school? And I said, I think I know the answer, and a one-word answer is sufficient, but I want to ask.
It's not a condition on this planning permission, but we do have a policy about fast food in proximity to secondary schools, and we would revise if a new secondary school opens up. Just need to check that the policy is updated to take account of a new secondary school.
Thank you.
That's very long, one word. Who else do I have? Adele.
Thank you, Chair. Always make sure that Sally, having sat through all of these meetings, gets asked a question. Yes, we did. She didn't answer it though. The thing about moving the bus stops and the zebra crossings and everything, there's a lot of confusion locally, and as a ward councillor, I have to say the people in the houses across from the school have been trying to get that bus stop moved from outside their house for years, and they've always been told no, it can't be moved. But now there is talk of moving bus stops and moving zebra crossings, and it's also not clear whether we're having another pedestrian crossing now in between the junction, which is signalised, and the zebra crossing that's here. If you could clarify the thinking behind all of this as quickly as you can.
Yes, I'll try and be as quick as I can. the provision of a new crossing came from the road safety audit that was done, and there was a road safety audit done on Southwark Road and Sawyer Street. It was seen that there was a need for it. There is some kind of rearrangement of the highway that needs to occur, so it is not a simple we will put it here. We have to kind of reconfigure the whole space. It is envisaged that it will be an additional crossing rather than incorporated within the existing, but that needs to be worked through with our colleagues through the 278 process. I think also it is important to note the level of change that the highway faces as a result of this application, plus also what the highway currently supports in terms of the cycle provision, the bus stops and the increased footfall. So there is a substantial redesign of the footway both on Southwark Bridge Road and Sawyer Street. But what I can hopefully provide some reassurance about, any change to the highway does need to go through a formal consultation process where those residents will have the opportunity to comment. However, what we do have is an outstanding road safety audit which we need to respond to, and that is within the report and the conditions that will follow.
Just very quickly, so is there any chance that rather than just the statutory consultation, that there can be a kind of more engaged consultation with local residents, rather than just the public notice in the paper, we are going to do the traffic order thing?
If you haven't noted, our colleagues have adopted a new approach, and that is very much a more engaged approach. So yes, I would envisage that it will be an inclusive design. If I can just, I know I'm taking up time, but the requirement around the servicing times, I think it is important to note it's one of the things that we did find challenging with this application. It's mixed use nature and the need to service that in a number of different locations and in a number of different ways. There was talk about the requirements of the school and particularly the catering requirements that come with the school, and therefore what that means in terms of both servicing and waste collection. So we would be looking for a nuanced approach, because you would have the residential component, you have the school component, and then you have the small commercial components. I think just having a singular approach might be quite challenging, but it's something that we can work through in the DSP.
Lucas?
I was going to propose a move to a vote.
Are people happy to go to the vote if there are no further questions? Is it you seconding that motion?
I just wanted to make a comment on that. We go to the vote.
I am going to invite people to make a comment after, and I'm going to go down the line. So I'll start with Hamish and then with Lucas. Hamish, is there any comment you would like to make at this juncture?
I would, as it happens, Chair. I just want to say that I think the application, while being, I think, clearly regretful that it doesn't fully deliver the affordable housing components that we would ordinarily expect in a policy compliance scheme. I think, having heard from the applicant the significant financial contribution that they are in effect making towards the provision of a new school in build cost subsidy, let alone the land value, I think that's more than my concerns in that regard. And I suppose I just wanted to say that it's really welcome that we're getting a new school in this part of the borough finally.
Leah?
Chair, I'll just echo Amish's comments. Yeah, I welcome it. Thank you.
Another echo.
Pretty much echo it, but the sadness is that if they are all having to put money into the school, in addition, that we've been collecting money for schools from all of our developments for years, and I don't understand why Section 106 money wasn't put into this scheme, if that is something that would have made the affordable housing more likely to have been delivered on site, or a greater quantum in lieu.
Right.
I echo what Cleo said.
Right. Sarah?
I'll echo Hamish, Cleo. Another grand chair.
No echo.
I'd just like to thank those people who've come and spoken both in favour and against. We see all your sides of the argument, and I can see that a lot of work has been put in by everybody, so thank you very much.
You're going to be a loss to this council. That was a wonderful way. That was so good. Right. Taking all account, I put the motion that we agree this with all the conditions and all the information contained in the other reports and things we've heard and said. Is that seconded? Is that agreed? All those show unanimous. Thank you all very much indeed. You may leave.